Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports for another mock draft Monday here on the channel. We are going to do another lottery simulation here for the top 4 picks of the 2025 NBA draft. Of course, the rest are done by standings. If you guys do enjoy the content you see here today, enjoy all of the analysis and the time I spend into evaluating these prospects, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more future uploads. Let's sim that lottery now, and the top 4 is decided. The Washington Wizards jump up to pick number 1. The Charlotte Hornets move up to pick number 2. The Philadelphia 76ers do keep that pick, jump up in the lottery all the way up to pick number 3. Very interesting landing spot for them. And then the Brooklyn Nets jump up to pick number 4 in front of what's going to be a huge summer for Brooklyn, one that has a lot of flexibility. Utah falls all the way down to 5. That is not unheard of for the team with the worst record in the NBA. In fact, they have a very high likelihood of actually picking 5th overall after the actual lottery does take place on May 12th. And then New Orleans falls down to 6 as well. The rest is stagnant, no other movement here in the lottery. Let's get over to that mock draft. And I have a special shout out as well to Texas Sports, a moderator in our Discord server. He's also the winner of the 2024-2025 NBA regular season Pick'em Challenge in the Utility Sports Discord server. Huge shout out to you, Texas Sports, one of my favorite viewers. Been watching the channel for a long time, leaving a lot of comments. So Texas Sports, first of all, go comment down below so everyone can show you love by hitting the like button on your comment. Then also everyone else, go spam W Texas Sports in the chat right now, just like it's a live stream. You guys know what to do. Go fill it up with some love over there. And let's keep moving on now to the first overall pick in the mock draft. And it is, of course, the Washington Wizards. At this point of the draft process, we all know who the first overall pick is going to be. Whoever does ultimately win the NBA draft lottery and secure the first overall pick will be making the selection of Cooper Flagg, first overall, the freshman phenom from the Duke Blue Devils, who ultimately did win AP Player of the Year, was such a dominant force. And remember, he was doing it as an extremely young freshman, will just be 18 and a half years old when the NBA draft officially rolls around in June. And that is because Cooper Flagg reclassified up a year early. His twin brother is going to start playing college basketball next college basketball season. That's how crazy this past season from Cooper Flagg really was. Not only was he extremely young, he was so dominant, and Duke really was a great team with him on the court especially. And I think for the Washington Wizards specifically, when you look at Cooper Flagg's skill set, there's a lot of different things we can highlight. Pretty much every single mock draft I try and switch it up, talk about something different. Sometimes I mention his contact balance, sometimes I try to talk mostly about his defense and the versatility it can give a team like Washington schematically, with stretching Alex Sarr out away from the rim defensively, because now you have Cooper Flagg as a low man helper. Otherwise, you can use Cooper Flagg aggressively on the basketball. You can put him on some of the apex wings in the Eastern Conference. Someone like a Jason Tatum, who is a pretty fun comparison, especially developmentally, for Cooper Flagg. You look at what Jason Tatum has become in the Eastern Conference and the kind of player that you hope Cooper Flagg can become in his NBA career. I think that's the exact kind of player you want Cooper Flagg to look up to, especially when it comes to the shot creation and ball handling departments, which I think are going to continue being areas of growth for Cooper Flagg moving forward. But Cooper Flagg is further ahead in his development pretty substantially than Jason Tatum was at his same age time, at his same age group. Jason Tatum at 18 and a half years old was not as good as Cooper Flagg is today, and that is a great head start for Cooper Flagg developmentally. I think his two-way impact is going to be immense. The comfortability with the ball in his hands, and a big reason why I feel comfortable saying what I just said, that Cooper Flagg present day is ahead of where Jason Tatum was as a draft prospect, was the amount of work and effort that Cooper Flagg has already put into his development at this point in time. Something that isn't constantly seen from top 1, top 2 picks. I think Cooper Flagg, if you go back to what he was 2, 3, 4 years ago, the idea of Cooper Flagg was obviously enticing. He has been a prospect that I've been watching for about 4 or 5 years now at this point. I've had him circled as a very likely first overall pick. At first, what I was expecting to be the 2026 NBA draft. Obviously, reclassifying moved him up a grade and up a class here for us. But it's still not surprising to me that after his development, and specifically the attention to detail on his on-ball repetitions, in game specifically when he went to Montverde Academy with Kevin Boyle, they put the ball in his hands, gave him opportunities to make mistakes against top competition, learn through those mistakes, and ultimately thrive. And there wasn't a ton of mistakes, let's be real about it. Cooper Flagg has really progressed and progressed very quickly. It hasn't been a very long learning curve for him, but he has pushed himself to improve his game and improve quickly. This is the type of player not only that can be a face of the franchise, he can be a cornerstone pillar that changes the entire direction of an organization. And I think for the Washington Wizards specifically, with a team that is really, really looking to add young pieces, add young players, find a new direction, find a new trajectory post John Wall, post Bradley Beal there in DC, I really do think Cooper Flagg is the guy that would solidify the Wizards not only as a very good young team up and coming, but an ultimate powerhouse down the road that would make the Wizards a very, very fun team to watch right now while they're young, and a very scary team for the other 29 teams in the league long term when you look at this collection of talent the Wizards have already assembled, ages 23 and under there in the nation's capital. Moving on now to pick number 2, the Charlotte Hornets, a team that I think getting the second overall pick is a really fascinating spot. Remember, a couple years ago, they did have the second overall pick and chose to go with a wing in Brandon Miller over a guard in either Amen Thompson or Scoot Henderson at the time. Obviously, there was a lot of debate on who the Hornets would pick second overall. But now if they get the second overall pick in this draft, I think they have the ability to add what they're lacking on their roster, which is why a few years ago I was very guard-centric for them. Even with LaMelo Ball being on the roster, I do think they need another ball handler, another initiator, creator of offense. And I think getting the second overall pick in 2025 would really solve a lot of offensive concerns and issues that I still see presently for the Hornets, despite some of their awesome young talent. And that is downhill rim pressure, creation for others with rim force, rim gravity applied. And I think second overall, you can really get that here by selecting guard Dylan Harper out of Rutgers. Son of NBA legend Ron Harper. He has NBA genes and he's got NBA game. That's for sure. Dylan Harper feels like a very, very safe bet to me as someone who has significant all-star upside, maybe even all NBA upside. A guy who I can see carrying an offense in the NBA with his positional size, standing around 6'6". While that doesn't make or break you solely as a prospect, we've seen a lot of other quote-unquote big guards struggle to be true primary initiators for NBA offenses. What I think really separates those guys from Dylan Harper is the ball handling capabilities, the ability to get to spots on the floor, not only consistently, but efficiently and effectively with his quickness downhill, the change of pace, change of direction tools. I love his ability to flip his hips, drop his shoulder, something he does very well at his positional size. Sometimes it can be hard to win the leverage game when you're so much taller than your opponent, but I do think he does a good job getting low when he has to maintain his driving lines and get to where he wants to go on the floor. I've talked multiple times in mock drafts this year about his ability to split in the pick and roll. Now for Charlotte, that's still going to be a huge question mark. Will Mark Williams be there long term? Right now, we don't know the answer to that. Remember, the Hornets did agree to trade him back in February before their deal with the Lakers ultimately fell through. The Hornets at this point in time have a lot of question marks. We really don't know what the center spot's going to look like long term. They have a huge project who's a few years away yet in Tidjane Salaün. The Hornets are a very unfinished project at this point in time. But with LaMelo Ball, Dylan Harper, and Brandon Miller, I do think you have three unique creation bets offensively. Miller, someone who can create off the bounce for himself a little bit in transition as well, but really thrives as a play finisher, which I think is going to be very useful. Next to a backcourt of Dylan Harper, LaMelo Ball, they have a very, very tall lineup construction with Ball and Harper in their backcourt. I do think it gives them some unique advantages against certain teams. You look at what Detroit's been able to do this year with Cade Cunningham and how that opens up lineup flexibility for them playing smaller guards next to him like Malik Beasley, Dennis Schroeder, for example, where you have 3, sometimes even 4 ball handlers on the court for Detroit, given their talent level. I think Charlotte can unlock some of those kind of optionalities by going after someone like Dylan Harper here, because now you have not one but 2 jumbo playmakers who can actually really handle, distribute the ball. And then for Dylan Harper, of course, one of the big concerns for many is that jump shot. I have a lot of faith, a lot of trust in it. At this point of the process, I feel like Dylan Harper has really cemented and solidified himself as the 2nd overall pick, regardless of which team ultimately does have the selection. But Charlotte, I think here is a home run landing spot for him, given some of the needs on their roster for another creation bet and someone else who can take some of the offensive load off of LaMelo Ball. Moving on to pick number 3, the Philadelphia 76ers here. What a time to be alive. And this is a weird pick, honestly. A pick where I think the 76ers very well could look to use this pick out in the trade market. Now, there's a variety of ways they could go about that. They could look to use it with Paul George, try and dump his salary somewhere if they want to reopen up flexibility. And of course, in the process, maybe bring in a variety of different contracts as well that could either enhance that flexibility or players that just flat out fit better around Maxey, McCain long term, while also still not selling off the end of Embiid's career here. But the other way is just to keep the pick. And it's a tricky conversation, it's a tricky discussion, because when you do have Joel Embiid, you're obviously in a situation where you want to compete, you want to contend, you want to be a really good roster, but we need to see him healthy, and we need to see him healthy at the right time. So I do think Philadelphia, one of the interesting teams to watch depending on what happens with this pick ultimately. But 3rd overall, I do have them here selecting wing Ace Bailey out of Rutgers, and this is a significant gamble. This is one of the biggest gambles you'll see in this entire mock draft, betting on Ace Bailey in the top 3 right after Cooper, Flagg, and Dylan Harper off the board. I really struggled in my process of going through this mock draft because Ace Bailey has not been a results-based player up to this point. His freshman season at Rutgers was very, very rough. And honestly, going back to his high school tape, I was not shocked with the way that he performed at Rutgers this year. I've been watching Ace Bailey for about 2.5, 3 years now. And by watching, I mean watching closely. Obviously, I'm keeping track of prospects for a while. But when I say watching, I mean I'm like really keeping tabs on a prospect. Ace Bailey is someone who, while his athleticism and some of the shot making did pop off the screen from his high school tape, there was also a lot of telltale signs that he was going to struggle playing in the Big Ten, playing against real Power 5 Division I competition. And it's not shocking to me because it, again, all stems from a lack of tools and skills that are very essential to be an elite basketball player. And he is extremely young. I'm not selling off all of his potential. There is a lot to grow into yet. But right now, what I'm telling you is, as a current day basketball player, is he ready to contribute winning basketball for an NBA team? I really do not believe the answer to that question is yes. We hear comparisons like Michael Porter Jr. I think that's pretty lenient. Michael Porter Jr. has a very functional fit into offenses as a floor stretcher. Ace Bailey loves to do the catch, hold. Wait a second. I understand the comparison from a size standpoint. I understand the comparison in terms of shot making talent, right? But Michael Porter Jr. is a very decisive offensive player. I think at this point in time, Ace Bailey is yet to really prove that he is that kind of decisive wing that can really fit around other talent, which is why, again, I think this is a huge gamble for the Philadelphia 76ers, where if it does pan out, if you do ultimately reach Ace Bailey's potential, this can be maybe an all-star caliber player for you down the road, but it also could be a player who doesn't provide much to your current roster, maybe minimizes the kind of window you have right now with Joel Embiid in the back end of his prime. And who knows, long term, if he doesn't improve his footwork, if he doesn't get stronger, especially with his legs and core, in order to best elevate his current level of play and style of play, where he is reliant on mid-range pull-up jump shots and trying to score in tight areas. If he doesn't get stronger, doesn't get better with his footwork, doesn't get a stronger base to him especially, I think there's a world where Ace Bailey really never finds a ton of success in the NBA. But I'm not saying that it's a complete bust of a pick here. I understand the upside, I understand the potential. I just think it comes with some significant risk, especially at the 3rd overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft. Moving on to pick number 4, the Brooklyn Nets, one of those recipients of a lottery win here, moving up from number 6 all the way up to number 4. And they're in a spot where you could go a number of ways. This is going to be one of the biggest risers of the week here for me in this mock draft. 4th overall, I have the Brooklyn Nets here selecting guard Jeremiah Fears out of Oklahoma. Jeremiah Fears, most recent Jonathan Givony big board from ESPN had him ranked 5th overall. And now, while I don't always agree, and in fact most of the times don't agree at all with Jonathan Givony's individual player rankings, what I do think his player rankings are very good at is suggesting what NBA intel he has as to who might go where and where the value is currently seen by NBA executives and scouts and talent evaluators. And I think right now, a lot of teams, based on what Givony is posting, I feel like a lot of teams have Jeremiah Fears in the 4 to 7 range. And I myself personally do not. Now, if I had to give kind of a loose comparison for Jeremiah Fears, I see a lot of Kemba Walker in his game, and some will hear that and say, hey, that's a former All-NBA player, that's a former multi-time All-Star. Other people might hear that and say, hey, that's a guy who didn't win a playoff series the first 6, 7, 8 years of his NBA career. There's a lot of ways you can look at things. Now, Jeremiah Fears is a little bit bigger, right? I think a little bit stronger than Kemba Walker was coming out. Also quite a bit younger. Another player who reclassified early into the 2025 NBA draft. So again, another player who's going to be about 18 and a half years old on draft night, extremely young. You're drafting him not for his current product of play, but for the long-term upside. And part of the reason I compare him to Kemba Walker, the handle is electric. He can get to several spots on the floor. He's extremely comfortable in the pick and roll. And I think specifically for Brooklyn, in my past mock drafts, I've talked at length about their ability to open up opportunities for their guards and wings through their offensive system, through their spacing, through delay action. And I think for Jeremiah Fears specifically here, one of the wonderful things that he can provide to Brooklyn is more creativity into their offense from the backcourt specifically. And I think one really essential area of growth for him early in his development is going to be off-ball utilization. And how does he move without the basketball? Playing at Oklahoma, he was not tasked with doing that very much. If you go through Jeremiah Fears' tape, a lot of his best plays, a lot of his notable plays come with the ball predominantly in his hands, walking it up the court, taking a high ball screen, making plays out of that. Very rarely do you see Jeremiah Fears making plays without the ball in his hands offensively. And while that can be a very hard thing for a young player to do, I do think it's an important thing, especially for someone who can get where he wants to a lot of the time. If he's able to master moving without the ball, if he's able to master relocation skills, something we just don't have a lot of footage or film on at this point in time, I think that changes him drastically as a player, and I think Brooklyn's a great landing spot for him to master those things. I think Jordi Fernandez is a very, very smart head coach, someone who understands how possessions don't start once the ball is in your guard's hands. In fact, you can set up your guards for so much success by putting them into advantage early with off-ball movement and a variety of other actions to set them up. And I think for Jeremiah Fears specifically, this could be a very, very good landing spot for him. Not only just for his short-term development, giving him an opportunity to play a lot early in his career, but it's also a great spot where you're getting a strong head coach who understands spacing, understands movement, and understands that the best thing for Jeremiah Fears might be at times not having the ball, trying to put him in advantage before he has the ball to make the game just that much simpler. I still think there's a real risk here as well. Jeremiah Fears is a player who, while the flash is there, you turn on a highlight clip of this guy, you're going to have a lot of fun watching him. The production hasn't been there quite. Now, people are going to point to some of his biggest games for Oklahoma, some really dominant showings. If you look at the overall body of work, he shot 28.4% from three, struggled from the field overall. True shooting percentage isn't that gaudy. Really, a lot of it's made up for by his ability to get to the free throw line. Drew a ton of fouls for the Sooners this past year, and again, that's a testament to his handle. That's a testament to being able to get to wherever he wants. I think there's a ton of upside here. I also think there's a lot of risk with some of the concerns I've had about him throughout this process too. I think really the definition in this draft class of a boomer bust prospect, you might think, well, that sounds like Ace Bailey. I really think Jeremiah Fears might be the real boomer bust pick in this year's class, and Brooklyn willing to take that risk here, 4th overall in this mock draft. Moving on to pick number 5, we have the Utah Jazz here now, a team that's never had the first overall selection in their franchise history. With the number 1 odds in this year's draft, they can pick at lowest pick number 5, which is ultimately what happens here in this mock draft. 5th overall, though, I do have the Utah Jazz here selecting guard VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor, and I do really love this selection for the Utah Jazz because of his defensive upside. Now, it's going to take a while for him to realize that, but I think specifically if you look at one of the biggest issues with Utah this past season, it was their ability to defend, and I think a lot of it started on the perimeter, whether it was terrible closeouts, bad recognition in terms of on-ball or off-ball positioning from their guards, specifically at times from their front court members. John Collins is not the most staunch defender. Lauri Markkanen, I think, had a pretty disappointing defensive season this past year. The Jazz need to improve drastically defensively. I think that they have an anchor in Walker Kessler, someone who can defend without fouling fairly effectively, someone who can anchor their defense at the rim especially, and then doesn't sacrifice shot blocking at the expense of boxing out and rebounding. I think Walker Kessler gives them a really strong starting point for building a long-term defense, but what he really needs around him is guys who can make up the ground, make up the area in other ways, and I think VJ Edgecombe is someone who has the potential to do that. Again, I'm choosing my words carefully here when I say potential compared to ability. I think it's still a work in progress for VJ Edgecombe defensively in terms of all of the things I talked about: IQ, positioning, defensive awareness, spatial understanding. But what he does have is he has the hops, the speed, and the quickness to make up for mishaps at times. And we saw it a ton in his freshman season at Baylor, where he just pops up out of nowhere time after time after time after time. And it was really a lot of fun to watch. I just love every time I revisit his film, whether it be a full game or segmented clips at times. There's just a lot to love defensively from him in moments, in spurts and in bursts. And at times, while you do think theory-wise you'd want someone who's extremely super consistent and polished, sometimes basketball can be a moments game. And winning in key select moments can really flip the course of games and honestly, teams winning or losing. And I think VJ Edgecombe would bring that defensively for the Jazz. And then I think Utah, out of all the teams right now, still feels very comfortably positioned for the 2026 draft. They're so young. This team is not going to be good next season, and that's a good thing. Unless they get Cooper Flagg, right? We'll withhold a little bit until the NBA draft lottery. But the Jazz, if they get VJ Edgecombe, this is not hurting them going into next year's draft lottery odds. They can give Edgecombe the ability to develop on the basketball offensively. They can give him plenty of time, reps, opportunity to grow as an offensive player as well. Again, I think potential is the key word here with Edgecombe. You notice a lot of these top picks outside of Flagg and Harper, it's been very potential-driven analysis here because that's what teams are drafting for. Do I always agree with that? No. Are these players all necessarily top 5 on my big board? No. But the reality here is teams are going to look at a guy like VJ Edgecombe, they're going to look at a guy like Ace Bailey or Jeremiah Fears and say, if that guy turns into an all-star or all-NBA, it sets us up a lot better than if we take just someone who ends up being a good, not great player, which is why these players tend to go very high in the draft regardless. Moving on to pick number 6, the New Orleans Pelicans, unfortunately in this lottery sim, fall down a few spots, but 6th overall, they're still in a spot where they can get a quality player, someone who can be a good contributor to their roster. A player they took a few years ago was Jordan Hawkins, obviously a very good movement shooter, won a national title with UConn in his final collegiate season under Dan Hurley. And now 6th overall, the New Orleans Pelicans have the ability to add another fun movement shooter next to him in Trey Johnson out of Texas, somebody who does a great job moving without the basketball, and then once the ball is in his hands, has the fundamental skills to capitalize on whether he's created advantage off the move without the ball or out of his handle, where hand down, man down, you get someone sagging off of you a little bit. Trey Johnson's got the skill set to pull up, rise, fire, and connect on those deep range shots, where he shot around 40% from 3 pretty much all season long for the Longhorns. Trey Johnson was one of the brightest spots for Texas this past season. While the program struggled a bit given their expectations and standards, I do think Trey Johnson was a real positive for them this past year. And I think for New Orleans specifically, another team that runs a ton of zoom action. You think about the benefit of having a great screen setter like Yves Missi, someone who's extremely athletic, can be a fun lob threat. This is also a bet here from the Pelicans on DeJounte Murray returning back to form. There's guards that they could look at. There's bigs they could look at. 6th overall, I have them going with a wing shooter, under the idea that with Brandon Ingram gone, Trey Murphy taking that role in their starting lineup long term, that around Zion Williamson you want to have the best floor spacing possible. And it's a real bet as well that Yves Missi is just flat out the center of the future. With that in mind, they add to their wings. They get another 6'5"-ish player who can fit into their roster, fit in as either an off-ball guy playing without the ball, but also someone who can create for himself when you ask him to. And I think Trey Johnson specifically here, while it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time with him, there are areas of his game where he definitely needs to grow. Free throw rate, ability to get to the rim, those two things are kind of tied together. I think the handle at this point, if it's not a hezzy pull-up, is a little shaky at times. There's still room for him to grow and develop, but I think New Orleans is a team that already has an interesting infrastructure in place where they're not going to have to overtask Trey Johnson early in his career. And as long as this team stays healthy and recovers next year, specifically with DeJounte Murray playing healthy, and if they can ever get a full season from Zion Williamson, Trey Johnson would be a very fun fit onto this current existing iteration of the Pelicans, who are undergoing a front office change and maybe some significant overall roster changes as well. We'll see who's safe and who's not there in New Orleans. Moving on to pick number 7, the Toronto Raptors, another very fun team to talk about. I just feel so energized every time I hop into one of these mock drafts to talk about every single one of these teams, because I just get so fascinated with the possible direction, possibilities, and opportunities that these teams have to change their DNA of their roster, change the DNA of their team makeup. And Toronto specifically is one where it's interesting. You look at their team, they don't have a lot of shooting, but their defense really started to turn a corner toward the end of the season, especially when they were playing against lesser competition. I felt like we just really saw them step up their game to an even better level there. There were still bumps in the road for sure along that path, right? I'm not saying the Raptors played perfect basketball down that last stretch of the season, but with Brandon Ingram there, while it's an expensive starting five, one that I'm not super comfortable betting in, I could understand why some are excited about the Toronto Raptors and their offense, especially moving forward with Ingram probably being one of their primary scoring options moving forward. I think one thing that the Raptors really badly do need around their existing core nucleus is another big man who can either anchor the rim defensively or score the basketball around the rim offensively. And luckily there's a guy here, 7th overall, who does both at a very high level in center Khaman Maluach from Duke. Extremely uber efficient from the floor in his lone season of college basketball. Khaman Maluach was one of the late entrants, very, very late, right up against the deadline to ultimately be an early entrant into the NBA draft here in 2025. I was sitting there refreshing my Twitter feed, making sure, is Maluach going to actually declare? Is he going to? He does. He is in the 2025 NBA draft. Shouldn't really be that surprising, but I continued to wait until the official announcement. Very glad he's in the NBA draft because he was so fun in his freshman college season for the Duke Blue Devils, where he posted a plus 53.0 net rating. No, that is not a typo. No, I did not just misspeak. 53.0 net rating. That is insane. When he was on the floor throughout the entire course of his freshman season in college basketball, Duke was 53 points per 100 possessions better than their opponent. I know I keep saying it. That's how ridiculous this is. I discovered this stat, obviously I went through, look at all the prospect profiles, everything that I'm putting together for the draft this year. And when I got to that number, it's been a month now at this point, basically, even over a month a little bit. I have been shocked ever since. I just cannot get that number out of my head. It is absurd. And I think for Toronto specifically, this kind of impact could unlock a lot of different stuff for their offense now and their defense. Now, it's not just, Maluach is on the floor, everything's just great now, but there's a lot of functionality. He's huge. He's a huge human being. Pause. What I mean is his rim pressure, rim gravity, like teams are going to be worried about him anywhere near the paint because he is just so big offensively and has really developed a touch that is emerging in a big way. And I think going into his NBA career, some of the biggest development for him, everyone's going to hyper fixate on the three-point shot and the upside there where he did make a few threes this past year for Duke. The biggest thing for him is if he ever gets a little 12-foot push shot where if he watches Ivica Zubac and adds that to his game, This guy is going to be a nightmare for teams. He's going to be a nightmare offensively, and he'll do it without ever needing to touch the ball for more than 1 second at a time as either a lob threat, rim roller who catches it in the pocket. All of that is going to be devastating for team defenses, which is awesome. And for Toronto, when you're already factoring in Scotty Barnes having the ball, you think about Grady Dick and his development. We've already talked about Brandon Ingram. Obviously, you have Emmanuel quickly. You start wondering, okay, well, where are the touches going to be for everybody? That's why someone like Khaman Maluach fits really well. And he's an awesome screen setter. I think the most under-discussed part of all of basketball, everyone talks about three-point shooting, everyone talks about ball handling, everyone talks about finishing, this, that, and the other thing. All these skills are all super hyper-fixated on. No one talks about screen setting. Screen setting is one of the most essential things in all of basketball, especially at the NBA level. When you think about the premier defenders, the guys who are the stickiest on-ball guys, who can seemingly get through every single screen, always stay attached to the hip, they're not going to do that against Khaman Maluach, who is again, huge human being. And I think for that specifically here for Toronto, Maluach's presence is going to elevate Scotty Barnes in 45 action. It's going to elevate Brandon Ingram's mid-range pull-ups. It's going to open up a lot more pull-up threes for Emmanuel quickly. If you want to run drop coverage against the Toronto Raptors with Khaman Maluach on the floor for them, it's going to be a lot of lobs and it's going to be a lot of pull-up jump shots. And the Raptors, while there are some questions and concerns I still have about their overall roster, period, the team is built to make pull-up jump shots. Quickly loves pull-up threes. Brandon Ingram is one of the most prolific pull-up mid-range shooters in the last 20 years. The Raptors can make pull-up shots. And Khaman Maluach is going to set you up to take a lot of those with his screen setting. So I think for the Raptors here, this is a brilliant fit, one that just makes a ton of sense. And I'm very, very ecstatic for the Raptors here to be getting Maluach at pick number 7. Moving on to pick number 8, the San Antonio Spurs here now. At this spot in the mock draft, there's a few prospects I do like a lot for San Antonio in this realm, especially with who is still on the board. Obviously, in a lot of my previous mocks, I have talked at length about Knueppel. A little bit of a disclaimer, we're not going to go with Knueppel here, 8th overall for San Antonio. Instead, we're going to select Derik Queen, /center out of Maryland. And I think for San Antonio this offseason, there's a variety of ways this team could look. 2 lottery picks, one projected to be at pick number 8, another projected to be at pick number 14. With some lottery luck, you never know. But assuming the Spurs have those 2 selections specifically, they have so many different ways to build this team. And I think choosing to go this Derik Queen path, if he's available, really drastically changes their matchups in a variety of playoff settings that they will in the future be in, assuming Victor Wembanyama is healthy. And I think if you add another light foot, quick big man like Derik Queen who can guard out on the perimeter, can challenge shots on the outside a bit without being a complete wash in the paint either. He can guard in the paint, does a very good job playing vertically. Now, I don't think he has the best athletic tools to be a big game-changing shot blocker in the NBA, but what I think he does very well is wall up, gets his chest up. He's not going to commit a lot of dumb fouls, and I think around Victor Wembanyama, when you already have the most premier shot blocker, maybe in the history of the game even, in Victor Wembanyama, you don't need another, hey, go average 2.5 blocks per game big man. You need someone who can be a tough, competitive defender who can move his feet. I think Derik Queen does that for you. And then when it comes to matchups, a lot of teams in the NBA are not going to be equipped to deal with 2 talented big men. Derik Queen, another face-up big, can put the ball on the deck. You think about the minutes when Victor Wembanyama's off the floor, there's your backup center. Derik Queen, for the 16 minutes a game that Wemby's not out there, you're playing the 5. But guess what? He has the skill, he has the talent to play the 4. He thrived in college playing next to another inside player in Julian Reese. Julian Reese not nearly as big, not nearly as talented as Victor Wembanyama, but in college was a force off the block with a variety of post moves. And I think for Derik Queen, his tight angled passing vision, his ability to spray the ball around a bit off of a live dribble would be very valuable for San Antonio. And then you also think, again, matchup-wise, you have to deal with Oklahoma City, who signed Isaiah Hartenstein to a 3-year deal. Chet Holmgren, obviously going to be a long-term staying piece there in Oklahoma City as well. At some point, you're going to want to beat that team. It's going to be a very tough challenge, but you're going to have arguably the best player on the court night in, night out with Wembanyama. Obviously, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander belongs in that race too. 2 of the top 5 players in the world going to be duking it out. you need more size. You're going to want more size to try and deal with Oklahoma City. Derik Queen can be a really additive piece into that. And I think there's just a lot of functionality into San Antonio's offense, whether it be the minutes that Wemby's out or the minutes he's in. You have another screen setter for him. You can run 45 action with either Queen or Wemby handling the basketball. Creates a lot of unique passing angles. I just really like this fit a ton for the Spurs at number 8. Moving on to pick number 9, the Houston Rockets here now on the clock via the Phoenix Suns. And I think for Houston specifically, this playoff run, the first playoff run of Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün's career, has given us a lot of information. Amen Thompson's had some struggles along the way. I've been very underwhelmed with the Rockets' offensive plan of attack, but I don't want to diminish the Rockets completely. They're still very young. The series isn't over yet with Golden State. I just think we're looking for ways for this team to build up moving forward. And at the heart of it is better efficiency in the half court, and that really stems from spacing and shooting gravity especially. Now, the nice thing for the Rockets, they already have a cheat code in place. They have a guy coming up named Reed Sheppard. Once that guy starts getting minutes, it's going to solve and alleviate a lot of those problems. What I want to do, though, is continue alleviating those problems. 9th overall, I have them here selecting someone who can handle the ball and facilitate for their offense, facilitate an early transition, and maximize not only Reed Sheppard's shooting gravity, but also maximize Alperen Şengün in the pocket. I want to maximize the athletic traits from Tari Eason and Jalen Green and Amen Thompson. And I think one more ball handler, one more guy who's capable in the half court of directing traffic, initiating offense, while being a good three-point shooter himself makes a ton of sense, which is why Kasparas Jakucionis here, 9th overall, I think does make a lot of sense for the Rockets long-term. You obviously right now might be saying, well, where are the minutes going to be for him in the backcourt? If Reed Sheppard, who is the 3rd overall pick, can't play a ton his rookie season, what about Jakucionis? And my direct response to that is, you don't draft in the top 10 for the rookie season. You're looking for, hey, what's this prospect going to do for us over the next 7-8 years? And I think Jakucionis specifically, one thing that I really love about him, everyone nitpicks the turnovers, everyone talks about the inability to consistently win in isolation. If you draft him 9th overall, you're not taking him to be your 1A player. You're not taking him to be your 25, 28 point per game scorer. The point of drafting him here is to maximize your other talent. And one thing that he does better than pretty much every single guard in this draft class is occupy big men in drop coverage. As he comes off a ball screen, something he's very, very good at. He knows how to run a pick and roll, and he has a variety of experience playing with different kind of archetypes around that. Think about his success with Tomislav Ivicic in Illinois. Ivicic, a stretch big man. He has pick and pop reps where he gets downhill and he's not necessarily looking to score. What he's looking to do is feel his man chase him, ride his hip. Oh, hey, the big man was in drop. Guess what? My popping big man, Ivicic, is wide open on the three-point line. Let me just turn, use my respectable positional size, and get the ball over to him for a wide open triple. Whether he makes it or misses, that doesn't really matter to me. The process is good. And while, yes, at times the results for Jakucionis weren't always great, there were some awesome results along the way as well. The step back three-point shot I think is very real. I think that's something he's going to be able to get to in the NBA. And I also think his dribble drive, stride stop, get into the middle of the floor, and wait until the team defense around him screws up is something that's going to be very beneficial, especially when he's not the 1A option. I think for a team like Houston, who already has a lot of talent, they have flexibility, they might go out and make a big trade. Maybe this pick finds its way to another team or city. We'll see what happens. I do think ultimately Jakucionis, if the Rockets do keep this pick, is a very unique landing spot for them to go with, because Jakucionis, a lot of people aren't going to look at them as this, long-term point guard needy team because they took Reed Sheppard last year. I think if you're going to maximize Reed Sheppard, he spends about 40% of his time on the ball and 60% of his time off the ball. And if that's the case, you need another guard. I think Jakucionis is someone who makes a lot of sense into that. And I think the Rockets become even more offensive focused with their draft strategy this year. Moving on to pick number 10, the Portland Trailblazers here now at this spot in the mock draft. Obviously, this mock has been quite a bit different, with Jeremiah Fears jumping all the way up to pick number 4. We have had some prospects slide, some prospects fall a little bit, and really shift where they're going in this mock draft. But 10th overall, I do have the Portland Trailblazers here selecting wing Knueppel out of Duke, and I like this pick a lot for Portland. I think it gives them a steadiness into their offense, and someone who I think carries a little bit more perimeter gravity than what the rest of this roster is really offering right now, while Toumani Camara and Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson continue developing, especially Camara, who's been a huge breakout candidate over the last couple of years since coming over from Phoenix in that DeAndre Ayton trade. Former Dayton Flyer. Shout out my Flyers, man. I'm a Dayton fan, so I love me some Toumani Camara. I think for Portland here specifically, what this team could use long-term a little bit more of is just pure shooting. And I think with Knueppel specifically, and everyone, there for some reason there's this collective sigh that everyone makes when their team gets mocked a shooter. Shooting wins. Last year in the playoffs, teams that made more threes tend to win their playoff series. You need to have three-point shooting. Everyone knows how essential it is, but when it comes time to actually get a three-point shooter for a cheap contract, like a rookie contract, they don't want him. I just don't understand it. This is a great get for Portland. Yes, it's not the sexy pick. Yes, it's not the guy who's going to turn into a four-time All-NBA player. What I'm telling you right now, though, is for Portland, this gives you functionality into your offense. This gives you more movement shooting. Now, can Chauncey Billups be the guy that actually maximizes that? That's a different conversation. I wouldn't bet on it. But I do like Knueppel quite a bit. I think his ability to catch and go, play off of rips, attack closeouts, all of that's really functional and valuable. I think for Portland specifically, with how they played down the stretch of the season, the wins that they started to put together back to back at times, Knueppel can be someone who's really additive in that and help you carry that moving forward into next season. Moving on to pick 11, my Dallas Mavericks here now. And I think for Dallas specifically, we have been extremely guard focused as the Luka Doncic trade obviously continues to be at the forefront of my mind 24/7. I'm going to try not to talk about it too much in this mock draft, but the Mavericks are looking for another guy who can dribble, pass, and shoot, and that's what they get here, 11th overall in Jase Richardson out of Michigan State. A very talented player with a very smooth lefty stroke, can really shoot the basketball, and it stands out in all of his analytics. The true shooting percentage, the three-point volume and success rate, the free throw rate, obviously, too, with his free throw percentage being quite good as well. I think Jase Richardson's a very, very sound, solid prospect, and I don't think there's much better of a landing spot for him than Dallas specifically, a team that's loaded with front court size, a lot of defense around him, and I think for Jase Richardson specifically, he's not going to be this elite advantage creator, but I think he's going to be a respectable advantage creator where he can still score the ball, take advantage of what the defense is giving him at times, while also still being able to fit into your team puzzle. And I think that's really important for this Mavericks team. If you're looking for someone who can be part of the current and future iterations of the Dallas Mavericks, you're trying to fit someone around Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, which means someone who's going to be able to adapt and fit into a lower usage role, like Jase Richardson did early this season for Michigan State, while also asking him long-term to be someone who can maybe scale up his play, scale up his role a little bit, and still be a productive, efficient, and successful player. And that's exactly what Jase Richardson did in the second half of his freshman season with the Michigan State Spartans. He's another son of an former NBA player, Jason Richardson, his father. I like to bet on NBA genes. Players whose dad played in the NBA tend to work out relatively well. Not every time, but a pretty good amount of the time. There's some success there. You think about the familiarity with the league. You have, honestly, some advantages in that way. Not only where you have family members who have lived through an NBA schedule, who understand the course of travel and understand what being an NBA player looks like. I think those are all very real advantages to begin with. But then there's also a comfortability of, I belong here. My dad played in the NBA. I belong in the NBA sort of thing. And while I tend not to spend too much time thinking about these and while I try very hard to avoid psychoanalyzing these players, I do think that is a pretty big vote of confidence for these guys. So, and we've seen it in years past where players who have experience around the league, who have had fathers play in the league, they just tend to stick well. And I think for Jase Richardson specifically here, 11th overall, the Mavericks are getting a good one who can fit with Kyrie, fit when Kyrie's out with his ACL still. And I think for the Mavs, you need more backcourt play, you need more playmaking, and I think this is a really, really strong get for them moving forward. Moving on to pick number 12, the Chicago Bulls here now, and I have them going with forward Noah Essengue out of Ratiopharm Ulm. And Essengue, one of my favorite prospects to talk about. Last year, Chicago made a very strong selection of Matas Buzelis toward the back end of the lottery, where they got this long, skinny, lengthy, talented playmaker, ball handler, at times point forward, especially in his high school tape in Buzelis. Now they're getting someone who has similar physical dimensions, a very skinny, twig-like, athletic front court player, but a very different skill set. Not quite that initiation bet, not quite the, hey, drive right, get a high, gather over the top of everybody and finish with a dunk. We're talking about someone who's going to be thriving as a cutter, a play finisher, someone who can be a spot-up, knockdown shooter, something he's really started to flash over the last month and a half or so, where the shooting at times has come and gone a bit this year, but for the most part, competing in Germany for Ratiopharm Ulm, along with Ben Seraph, and honestly, a pretty solid Ratiopharm Ulm team. They've been very competitive this year, and Essengue has been a big-time contributor for them offensively in that role. And then defensively, what you're really looking at is the combination of length, size, and athletic tools like his fluidity, where he's able to flip his hips well, maneuver out in space well. I think there's a lot of upside here. Now, for me, I do tend to be worried about players who I think are relatively position locked. And what I mean by that is guys who are going to play one position in the NBA. There's just a lack of lineup flexibility that those guys bring, which at times can limit what your coach is able to do night in, night out for matchups. It limits what you are able to do come playoff time. If you want to play this guy 20 minutes, he's going to have to play 20 minutes at this one position, which means you need this kind of player next to him, that kind of player next to him. And for me, with Essengue, he is pretty position locked as a power forward. I don't really see the potential for him to really maximize ever being a 5. I think with his contact balance and how skinny, light, and frail, honestly, he is, he can't really play center to me in the NBA, and I don't think there's a lot of optimism there. Now, if he completely transforms his body, puts on about 30 pounds of muscle, maybe that becomes something that's a different conversation, because he does have the length and height to at least be, in some regards, a smaller ball 5, but I don't think that's the best way to win anyway. So I do think you are a bit position locked here with Essengue, playing the 4 long term for you, and with Matas Buzelis, with Patrick Williams, with Nikola Vucevic, like that's kind of the position you'd think he would play anyway for them, but it doesn't offer a ton of versatility or flexibility into what you want to do for future moves. So I think for Chicago, while this isn't a no-brainer decision by any stretch of the imagination, I do think Essengue's play finishing skills, next to Josh Giddey, next to Kobe White, next to Matas Buzelis, who I think, and what I'm really hoping is the Bulls continue to lean into his creation abilities to really maximize his game on the ball. I think Essengue would be a very fun, unique fit off the ball for them offensively, while giving them more length, size, fluidity, speed, quickness out of the corner especially. Then obviously you're hoping Essengue can continue developing and growing as a rebounder, and if he does get a bit stronger, just a really, really solid pick here at 12 for Chicago. Moving on to pick number 13, the Atlanta Hawks here via the Sacramento Kings. Remember, this pick is top 12 protected, so there's a chance on draft lottery night that the Kings get this pick back, but overwhelmingly likely that the Hawks will be making this selection on draft night. 13th overall, I have them here selecting forward Collin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. And if you've been watching my mocks over the last few weeks, I have talked at length and at length and at length about Trae Young and how you need more initiation around him. You need another guy who can create offense. Obviously, people are going to say, well, they had DeJounte Murray. That didn't work out. That's why someone like Jase Richardson, who I've highlighted multiple times, would be great for them. But with him off the board, I went with Collin Murray-Boyles because while there is a changing of the guard right now, Landry Fields out as GM in Atlanta, I don't know for certain that the Hawks' philosophy will change around Trae Young, which is allowing him to be Trae Young and everyone else around it get in line. They drafted Zachary Sachet, someone who basically created very little offense for himself as the former number 1 overall pick. He had a really great rookie season. I'm not suggesting that they did anything wrong with that. I think he had a great year for them, and I think he does fit Trae Young extremely well. But it's very clear internally that the Hawks are looking at their roster and saying, Trae Young starts everything. We need guys who can finish stuff around him. And I do think that maximizes Trae Young in some ways, but I also think we see some of the limitations in their team when Trae Young's off the court. Now, if Jalen Johnson was healthy this year and was able to play the second half of the season, I might feel a little bit differently. Jalen Johnson, very clearly their second best player. He's an awesome front court member. I think Collin Murray-Boyles can be a contributor in that regard as well. Not to the level that Jalen Johnson is, But if you're looking for someone who can also be a screen short roll, dish to the dunker spot, make plays out of the middle of the floor, get him to the nail, get him to the free throw line, let him do some stuff with the ball in his hands with his connectivity, passing prowess, understanding of the court. That stuff all fits very well off of Trae Young, in my opinion. And this is kind of the play finisher plus connector archetype that we're looking to put for Atlanta if they continue to look in that direction, in that process of we don't need primary creators around Trae Young. We need guys who can be connective tissue pieces around him. And that's what I think Collin Murray-Boyles brings offensively here. Obviously has a very unique play style for his height and size. Obviously people are going to throw out the Draymond Green comp. I think for Collin Murray-Boyles, obviously you're looking at defensive impact being one of the main reasons to draft him as well. He is someone who is a gap filler. That's one of my favorite ways to describe him. Just picks up a lot of the loose change that your team defense needs, whether it's timely rotations or filling in low man help right when he needs to. Like doing all of those little things. And this is the one issue too when you go on NBA Twitter and you're like, why doesn't this guy play more? He averages 15 points in 20 minutes. Well, yeah, he missed his low man help 6 times in a row. Or yeah, he wasn't gap help when he was supposed to, or he didn't provide any nail help on Joel Embiid or on Luka Doncic, right? There's a lot of things coaches are looking at. I think NBA draft Twitter and NBA Twitter in general just really hyper fixates on the offensive scoring standpoint, and at times assists can be a part of that too that they hyper fixate on. While Collin Murray-Boyles has a lot of attractive qualities to his game, the one thing I'm really trusting in him as a prospect is getting the defensive side of the court right consistently, being a smart, high IQ player, and I think that will help in Atlanta a lot around Dyson Daniels, around Jalen Johnson, around Zachary Sachet, and what I'm hoping Atlanta can ultimately build long-term is a very good congruent team defensive unit behind Trae Young, even with his limitations. Pick 14 now. The San Antonio Spurs via the Atlanta Hawks here now. Obviously, with Atlanta missing the playoffs through the play-in tournament, the Spurs find themselves in a spot with not one but 2 lottery picks. And this one they will spend on Arizona wing Carter Bryant, a very athletic forward. And I went back and forth here between Carter Bryant and Rasheer Fleming for the San Antonio Spurs. I ultimately stuck with Carter Bryant because I do think his athleticism and three-point shooting and age make me believe that teams will value him higher than Rasheer Fleming on draft night. He shot the ball extremely well from 3, and as a very young prospect, a true freshman coming out of college this year, he is going to be, I think, very highly sought after. A lot of people right now kind of wishy-washy on him. I see him in that 20, 25 range quite frequently. I think there's a real world where he draws significant lottery interest from teams. The success rate on his threes this past year, the cutting potential. This is the type of player, once he gets into workouts with teams, when we get to that part of the draft process, we're going to start to hear more and more teams having him in for workouts. We're going to start to hear more and more teams reportedly liking him a lot. And I think it's because of a variety of factors. The production, while it was somewhat shaky throughout the course of his freshman season, not in terms of consistency or reliability, but it's just he was a low producing player, very low usage rate, 16% usage rate, average single digit points, single digit rebounds, was not a central component or cog at all for Arizona. Obviously was a kind of on the back burner for their offensive game plan. I'm trying to be nice in the way I put it, but I think for Carter Bryant specifically here, if you're looking at what he's going to bring for San Antonio, it's that exact same role. You're not drafting someone to, hey, let's give him 20 isolations and pull the ball away from De'Aaron Fox or Wembanyama. No, that's not what you're looking to do, especially now that you have Derik Queen as well, another guy who can handle, make some plays with the ball in his hands. You need functional, athletic players who can fit off of that, and I think Carter Bryant checks a lot of those boxes. I think would be a very exciting, intriguing player for the San Antonio Spurs to partner up with Derik Queen and Victor Wembanyama and De'Aaron Fox there in San Antonio. Moving on to pick number 15, the Oklahoma City Thunder here now. This pick via the Miami Heat. What a perfect season this might be for Oklahoma City. Good enough to maybe win the Western Conference, maybe even the NBA Finals. It would not shock me. And now they get the 15th overall pick as well, as Miami made the playoffs through the play-in tournament. Remember, this pick was lottery protected. So this was the absolute highest Oklahoma City could have been picking with this selection. We'll see what happens with that Sixers pick as well. Maybe that falls down to pick number 7. You'll have to stay tuned for future lottery videos, wink wink, Tuesday this week. But 15th overall Oklahoma City here, I have selecting Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joseph's. He doesn't fall far from the pick prior where I mentioned him as a potential candidate for the Spurs. 15th overall, I think Oklahoma City feels very, very happy with this selection. And I think even to a greater extent than what I talked about with San Antonio looking for players who fit around their core nucleus, Oklahoma City is as established comes. They have pretty much every single piece of their roster figured out. They've got their MVP creation bet in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They have a high post, top of the key, delay action playmaking hub in Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a brilliant passer and a great defensive player. Then you also have one of the best shot blockers and defensive players in the entire league in Chet Holmgren, someone who I think his impact is completely understated by media. While he doesn't score the ball 20, 25 points per game, he does a lot of everything really, really well and is efficient. Jalen Williams, any box that Mark Daigneault needs checked, Jalen Williams is going to go do it. Hey, you need me to guard power forwards tonight? I'll do it. You need me to guard a point guard? I'll do it. Up and down the lineup, guards all over the place. Lou Dort, one of the best premier on-ball defenders in the entire association, and the refs let him get away with fouling a lot too, which is really great. And he's really growing as a three-point shooter. This Thunder team is loaded. One thing I do think they could use more of, though, a little bit more front court size that is non-center size. And I think Rasheer Fleming specifically here gives them some more flexibility into their lineups, where playing Isaiah Hartenstein with no Chet Holmgren might get even better with someone like Rasheer Fleming at the 4 next to him, or Chet Holmgren playing some 5 with Hartenstein on the bench. Rasheer Fleming can be another stopgap fit into there, where Fleming's perimeter length, defensive acumen, and play finishing tools, which we've really seen a ton at St. Joseph's, whether that be as a three-point shooter off the catch or as a finisher off of cuts, dives, whatever you want to call it. He's going to be beneficial for Oklahoma City as a finisher, not someone who's going to dribble, not someone who's going to pass a ton or create for your offense at all. In fact, there's almost no potential there with Rasheer Fleming. But what there is for Oklahoma City is positional size and not flexibility or versatility, but value. And I think for the Thunder here, this is the type of player that I think is somewhat missing on their roster. It's very hard to find things that are lacking here in Oklahoma City. There's so many good players I could continue mentioning. Isaiah Joe, Alex Caruso, Case and Wall. I mean, the list is long as the day is, right? You guys know how much I loved AJ Mitchell last draft cycle. This team is loaded. They don't need great players, but they're getting someone who's going to be very, very good for them as well here in Rasheer Fleming. Pick number 16, the Orlando Magic here, a team that I do think has some pretty significant needs. Unlike what we just talked about with Oklahoma City, I think the Magic really do need to look at their front court, specifically the center spot, and then also a backcourt creation bet for them offensively. Now, I think via the way of trade is what makes sense for Orlando in terms of what their roster is currently lacking and the need for instant impact. But it's also Orlando, and we have to think about the tax. They have 2 big contracts committed now with Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero long term. I just don't see a way that Orlando is going to want to go trade for another max caliber player unless they're trading one of those 2 guys, which I don't think that's going to happen either. So drafting here does make a lot of sense because of the cost-controlled impact that they can hopefully bring. So 16th overall, I do have the Magic here selecting center Asa Newell out of Georgia. He'll be making the drive south from Athens down to Orlando. And I think it's going to be one that is a worthwhile pick for the Magic. While Orlando has really struggled to shoot the 3-ball consistently, they might be taking some notes from the New York Knicks. And one of the few teams in recent NBA history who's been able to win playoff series without winning the 3-point battle. And the reason why is the ability to create second chance points. Josh Hart, one of the best rebounding wings in the entire association, if not the best rebounding wing in the entire league. Then you also look at Mitchell Robinson, especially last year's Knicks team before the trades for Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. Last year's Knicks team was a get-it-out-of-the-mud team around Jalen Brunson. And Mitchell Robinson, one of the premier offensive rebounders in the association, was a huge impact player for them as well. I think for Orlando specifically, if you're looking at winning the possessions battle to try and overcome some of your 3-point deficit, Asa Newell is a very sensible selection for them in this range of the draft. At number 16, Asa Newell averaged over 3 offensive rebounds per game this past year, had a really great gaudy rebounding rate throughout the course of his entire season, has very good touch, can be an interesting screen and roll guy. I think if you're looking at his development, I think for him, it's realizing, hey, I can dunk more frequently than I do. I think at times can be a little reliant on his touch, although his touch is very promising and I think is going to be something that translates relatively well to the NBA. I would like to see him get on the rim more, play above the rim a little bit more frequently. I think he has the athletic tools and the physical gifts to do it. I just think it's a mindset thing of, hey, we want you to dunk more, get on the rim as much as possible. But he applies himself in a lot of ways. Defensively offers a lot of versatility, flexibility in terms of who he's guarding and how he's going to be able to rotate all around the court. Moves his feet very well. I think fairly fluid hips for a center, especially in the NBA. So I think for Orlando specifically here, this is someone who can be a really strong addition into your team defense, but can really help your team offense by screening, rolling, finishing around the rim with touch, and then also getting on that offensive glass, which is really at the heart of this decision and selection here for Orlando, 16th overall. Pick number 17, the Minnesota Timberwolves here now. This pick via the Detroit Pistons. Shout out to my Pistons fans. If you guys are watching right now, shout out to you. I'm so happy that the Pistons were able to win a playoff game, something we hadn't seen in a long time. So I'm just very, very happy for Detroit. And Minnesota, man, what a job they're doing. They have the Lakers on the ropes, 3-1 in that series. They've been really, really working their tail off. Jaden McDaniels having a great playoff series for himself. Naz Reid just cannot miss. 2 words. Naz Reid. You guys know what I'm talking about if you're a Minnesota fan. 17th overall, I have them here selecting Danny Wolf out of Michigan. And I think every time I watch Minnesota, like, obviously, for those who don't know, I did cover this team as well for a year in person in the locker room, doing all that kind of stuff before I moved personally. But, so I know the Wolves very, very well. And I think back to Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, that pairing a lot, the value of positionless playmaking and the value of 2 big men able to connect together on 45 action and lobs and some of their horns flare looks that they would run. I think Danny Wolf specifically is someone who can unlock a lot of that back. And if the Wolves do have to make tough decisions here on losing someone like Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Naz Reid or more than likely Julius Randle this offseason, they're going to be looking probably for front court depth. Danny Wolf is someone who I think is pretty plug and play for them. They've got experience with that coaching staff with Chris Finch and how to utilize this kind of player next to Gobert. And it also gives them just more sheer size, again, in the West, dealing with some of your matchups, whether it be Oklahoma City, who has a lot of size. San Antonio in this mock gets another big man. You think about, obviously, Denver. You want to have as much size as possible to throw at Jokic. Danny Wolf contributes in those ways just by being another big body, but he's extremely skilled, can handle the ball, can play off the ball a bit, knock down some jumpers this year as well. Like, there's a lot of hope that he can continue growing as a player. I think, some people are going to throw out the Domantas Sabonis comparison. I just don't really see that. I think Sabonis is a bit stronger handle, a stronger body frame as well. I think people underrate how strong Domantas Sabonis is, period, and how good of a basketball player he is. I don't think Danny Wolf will become that, but I think Danny Wolf, in that archetype, in that play style, is going to be able to find success. And I think for Minnesota, it's a really good landing spot for him specifically next to another big like he was with in Michigan, next to Vlad Golden under Dusty May. Moving to pick number 18, the Washington Wizards here now via the Memphis Grizzlies. And for Washington, who landed Cooper Flagg first overall, they already got a super safe, high upside player in Cooper Flagg. Now they're going to roll the dice on a significant risk. And that player here, 18th overall, is Yegor Demon, someone who offers elite positional size. And jumbo playmakers get really, really valued a lot. It's very possible that this young man goes way before pick number 18 on draft night. I think he's one of the players I'm really having a hard time pinning down where his draft range is. And I'm trying to not let my own personal evaluation on him interfere with where I think he's going to get drafted. As you guys know, these mock drafts are not what I would do, but what I expect to happen. And that's why we kind of get into draft ranges where I have players around certain spots. But draft night always surprises me one way or another. A few years ago, it was Cam Whitmore falling to pick 20. Obviously, one thing I was surprised about, too, was Jalen Hood-Schifino going above him. So it's not that I'm always wrong in terms of what I thought would or should happen. It's just sometimes teams make crazy decisions, like drafting Tidjane Salon 6th overall last year. Washington, this is the range where I could really understand taking this kind of bet. Yegor Demon, great passing feel, great passing vision, understands where team defenses are at. And I think while the addiction to jumbo playmakers is really immense in the NBA right now, and I think every team's looking for that next big point guard who can see over the top of the defense and deliver any pass, there's so much that comes with it to be a great one. Like, people are going to look at Luka Doncic and attribute a lot of his greatness to the fact that he is tall and huge. But that's not really what makes him great. It's the shot making, it's the handle, it's the hesitancy and the ability to change speeds, change directions. Obviously, we've heard people talk about these things too. I'm not just reinventing the wheel here talking about Luka Doncic, but I think it's pretty lazy to look at a point guard and say, oh, well, because he's tall, he's going to have a huge advantage. Yegor Demin is nothing like Luka Doncic, despite being a big ball handler. They are not at all in any way similar as players, really. And I think with that in mind, I'm not nearly as high on Yegor Demin's ceiling as others. But I could see a team like Washington, who's already made several first-round selections in recent years with Bob Carrington, Alex Sarr, Cooper Flagg now in this mock draft, Bilal Coulibaly, Keyshawn George. They feel very comfortable with their young core. This is where taking a stab, I think, makes sense, because if Yegor Demin does hit, if you get this point forward, ball handling decision maker that can comfortably develop as a shooter, ball handler, and becomes all of a sudden not afraid to get to the free throw line, that would be great. But worst case, if he doesn't pan out, you took a risk, you took a gamble. In a lot of ways, it's something like what Oklahoma City did with Alexei Pokusevski as well. So Yegor Demin, very interesting prospect here, and one that the Wizards at 18, I could see rolling the dice on in this draft. Moving on to pick number 19, the Brooklyn Nets here via the Milwaukee Bucks. And for Brooklyn specifically, after going with Jeremiah Fears at number 4 in this mock draft, I have the Nets here now at number 19, going with forward Hugo Gonzalez out of Real Madrid, another player who has the tools and development pathway to become a very unique player in the NBA with his ability to make the extra pass, very selfless, in his approach as a basketball player, someone who I think very comfortably can attack downhill, but keeps his eyes up, able to read the floor, able to react to rotations and help defenders. And I think specifically for Brooklyn, after going with Jeremiah Fears, someone who's going to be a high-volume ball handler likely at the NBA level, you're looking for guys who have connective qualities and tissue to fit in around that, and especially for this team that I think could have a huge offseason ahead of them, either in terms of adding existing NBA talent like Giannis Antetokounmpo or some free agents. We'll see which way they go. The Nets looking for young players who I think have significant upside with pretty respectable floors. I think Hugo Gonzalez, there's enough belief around the NBA right now that his jump shot is going to be something that is legitimate and will garner teams to actually defending him. Now, the percentages don't always suggest that at this point in time, but I think there's a good amount of belief in his mechanics, fundamentals, everything there. And I think for Brooklyn specifically, what you're looking for, again, is impact contributors on the wing, guys who you're not hitting the panic button. You're not saying, we got to get that now, but you're comfortable taking those long-term risks, those long-term bets. I could see Hugo Gonzalez spending a lot of time with the Long Island Nets in year one of his career, or just flat out playing with the Brooklyn Nets team if they take a more long-term approach and are comfortable waiting for 2026, 2027 drafts to really step on the accelerator at some point. We'll see what Sean Marks does. I just think overall 19 here, Brooklyn gets a player they're willing to really take that long-term bet on in Hugo Gonzalez. Moving on to pick number 20, the Miami Heat here now via the Golden State Warriors. Miami, it's got to be a guard. I just feel like it's hard because there's a lot of times I'm looking at Miami and I think if they got another big, lengthy, athletic forward, wing type who could help them defend, it could tidy up and tighten up a lot of their team defense, especially if they do go with the Bam Khalil Ware pairing defensively next year. They could be really, really good defensively. But I also look at their offense and say they just need another guy who can dribble, pass, and shoot. And 20th overall, they're going to take a stab on someone who has the upside to be that here. And I have them selecting guard Nolan Traore, the French prospect. I talked about it at length in this year, but guy who coming into the cycle, everyone thought was going to be a top 5 pick. Really ended last year strong, but this year tapered off quite a bit. Just was not an effective, efficient player this season. But there's still a wide belief around the NBA at this point that he is going to be able to develop and blossom into this player who can get downhill whenever he wants. I think there's a lot of trust and belief in his first step ability. And I do think in NBA basketball, especially, beating your guy off the bounce, getting to the spots on the floor that you want to is so essential. It's basically the opposite of what people are worried about right now with Kasparas Jakucionis, where teams are worried and especially draft evaluators are worried how often he can beat his guy off the bounce one-on-one. That's something I highlighted back in October or November of 2024 with Jakucionis. One thing I was concerned about when everyone else was saying top 3, top 2 pick, I was saying, well, hold on. He does struggle in a lot of areas. I think we found like a pretty healthy middle ground right now with Jakucionis. And I think if you're trying to sell yourself on Traore, you're telling yourself, look, this guy can get downhill. He knows how to utilize the pocket as a passer. He knows how to use screens. Well, yes, he wasn't efficient. He's also playing professional basketball. You hear people say, well, what if he was playing college basketball instead of pro basketball in France? A lot of people would be saying, well, there's a good chance he would have succeeded better. And there's a good chance his numbers would look way better. This, that, and the other thing. That's why when you're actually evaluating, you need to look at skills and tools. Respectable positional size, great downhill quickness. There is a lot to be excited about with Traore. Now, I still find myself pretty hesitant with his overall finishing tape and his ability to actually shoot the basketball, which if you're going to be a high-volume ball handler in the NBA, you have to have all of those things checked off to be leading a good team. You know, this is a developmental pick for Miami. It's a risk. There's other players I maybe would prefer over Traore at this position at this point, but I do think he would be in pretty strong consideration here from Miami at pick number 20. Moving on to pick 21, the Utah Jazz here now. This pick via the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I think for Utah specifically, after going with VJ Edgecombe at pick number 5, it's a pretty open door for the Jazz. Now, you could look at shooting. I think that's something that would be really good for them. Obviously, I still think this team defense needs to get quite a bit better. But ultimately, with Danny Ainge, I think he's going to look for value. He's going to look for a player who either got overlooked because of a somewhat questionable college season, or he's going to look at a variety of other options as well when it comes to either high-impact productive players or guys who have long-term ceilings that he wants to believe in that are maybe getting undervalued in this draft. In 21st overall, I have them going with that latter approach, taking forward Liam McNeely out of UConn. And I think for the Jazz specifically here, after drafting VJ Edgecombe in the top 5, you're looking at someone who can stretch the floor, be an effective shooter for this team, and with the hopeful long-term development specifically of Isaiah Collier as maybe the point guard of the future for the Jazz. I don't really buy that, but a lot of people do. You're looking at trying to stretch the floor, spread the game out a little bit, and someone like Liam McNeely, who was a very effective play finisher for Montverde Academy around Derik Queen, around Cooper Flagg, around Ace and Newell, around some really talented players who've already gone in this mock draft. Liam McNeely really thrived next to other talent. Now, at UConn, he struggled quite a bit, just did not have the season that he was hoping for. I've talked at length in mock drafts this year about why that is. I think the lack of real high-quality playmakers in UConn really did hurt him. I think the transition to the Jazz, while it's a really young, up-and-coming team that is going to struggle probably mightily again next season, I do think this is a better roster fit around him in terms of guys who can handle, guys who can play make, and Liam McNeely can be kind of relegated to doing the shooting and play finishing while also being a pretty solid positional rebounder as well. Moving on to pick number 22, the Atlanta Hawks here now on the clock. This pick via the Los Angeles Lakers and Atlanta. Again, a team that is going to continue looking for impact bets on this roster. We went with Collin Murray-Boyles earlier in this mock draft. 22nd overall, I have them going with guard Ben Saraf out of Ratiopharm. So this is one of those examples where you're getting another guy who does have some of those creation tools, but this is more of a natural fit, I think, next to DeJounte Murray. Ben Saraf's probably not going to be a 29 to 33% usage rate guy in the NBA. Really, if things go right and he gets to the volume that I expect him to be at in the NBA, he'll probably kind of level out to a 22, 23% usage rate guy, which is really what you're probably looking for next to Trae Young, next to Jalen Johnson, someone who can kind of take some of the burden off of Trae Young's shoulders, maybe lift your offense a bit when he's off the floor. And Saraf specifically is going to do that by playing off of ball screen, something that obviously Atlanta already does a ton of anyway. Quinn Snyder's an extremely creative coach with the way he decorates and disguises certain actions. I think especially with some of the Spain action he runs, some flex action even. Obviously, they utilize short rolls more than any other team in the league. And I think Saraf, as a left-hander, gives them a little bit more creativity into their play design as well, because instead of scheming stuff to the right for Trae Young, you can now scheme some stuff to the left. And I think Saraf and Trae Young would fit off of each other relatively well because of that. Their ability to maybe play off the wings from each other would be pretty unique. Now, again, this is a developmental pick. There's a reason we're taking him at pick 22, not a pick in the top 10. Questions about his swing skills really being the three-point shooting. I find myself to be a big believer in Ben Saraf. I think he's going to be someone who's going to be able to consistently shoot the basketball at the NBA level. I think he's too skilled, and I think he has too much of a motor and desire to win to not elevate his game when it comes down to it. But the Hawks specifically, like, they found success with Bogdan Bogdanovic next to Trae Young. I think you can envision Saraf in that Bogdanovic role now that Bogdanovic is in LA. Obviously, just wasn't having the year this past year, especially before they traded him. I think Saraf, a much cheaper, younger version, and honestly offers some more upside even as a passer, creator for your offense in the half court than what Bogdanovic offered. But I think that's kind of the play style level that I think you're kind of envisioning or mirroring into the Hawks offense around Trae when he and Saraf would ultimately share the floor. Pick number 23, the Indiana Pacers here now. At this spot in the draft here, I think with some of the pieces off the board, Indiana, they have a variety of different ways they could look. A few weeks ago, we talked about Alex Condon, someone who could be really good for them in delay action. There's just a lot of different ways this Indiana team can look. I decided here to go with forward Will Riley out of Illinois. This is a bet on upside for the Pacers, who really don't need depth right now. They're going to take a young player. They're going to take a true freshman who had a lot of intrigue, ultimately chose to go to Illinois. Season was up and down for him quite a bit, but I think one of the biggest things that you're going to bet on is his dribble pull-up and his ability to score the basketball in early transition and out of advantage opportunities. And I think for the Pacers, a team that plays with very good pace, Tyrese Haliburton, one of the best offensive engines in the entire NBA. Will Riley, I think, could really thrive playing in this kind of team context and team setting long term. And I think for the Pacers specifically, they'd be okay with Will Riley spending a lot of time with their new G League affiliate and not really focused on him getting 15 to 20 minutes per game. We already know Rick Carlisle doesn't like to play young players a ton. I think that's kind of a testament to how young players don't always contribute to winning, especially early in their careers. It's just very difficult to do that. It's hard to step in and be mentally sound enough and physically good enough to be a winning NBA player immediately on day one of your career. And I think for Indiana, given their depth, given how Jarris Walker doesn't have reliable minutes, given all of the things about Indiana's roster right now, they don't need Will Riley to be a high minutes guy. They don't need Will Riley to be an instant contributor. This is a draft. Be patient, develop, and we'll see where he's at in 2 years. And I think that's the best thing for Indiana anyway at this point in time, given the fact that they might be loaded up to make another big trade, to get another superstar next to Haliburton at some point. Cough, cough. No, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say the name I was going to say. But Indiana's lined up for something. I think Will Riley right now is a good little stopgap of, let's draft a player we feel comfortable about long term. I also would love to see the Pacers trade this pick if they could get future draft considerations instead. We'll see what Indiana ultimately does, but I think a very fascinating opportunity for them this year for sure. Pick 24, Oklahoma City on the clock again, this time via the LA Clippers. Remember, at 15, we went with Rasheer Fleming out of St. Joseph's, and now 24th overall. I have them doubling down on the defensive, physically gifted archetype here with wing Adu Thiero, who is one of my favorite players in this entire draft to watch. Extremely productive. Averaged about 16 plus points per game this past year, and he did it really without a three-point jump shot. This is the type of player you want Lou Dort to take under his wing. If Lou Dort is this kid's mentor, oh my goodness. Very, very strong physical body archetype. In a lot of ways, does remind me a bit of OG Anunoby in terms of the functionality as a cutter, play finisher at the rim. Extremely strong, really, really good 2-foot jumper as well. I think when it comes to athletic traits, obviously, when you see someone throw down a tomahawk dunk, you think, wow, that guy's athletic. But I think people really underrate short area, tight space, physical gifts. And that's an area where Adu Thiero, I think, really shines. In tight spaces, in close area, quickness, in a lot of small little things, coordination, balance, play strength. I think he checks a lot of those boxes. I think this is a player who, the fact that he missed March Madness, missed the end of the year with an injury, I think he's getting really underrated right now. I think OKC is a very smart organization. They're going to look at this as an opportunity to get another player who can really fit. I think specifically the fit with Hartenstein is really good here. Adou Thiero really shined playing off of Boogie Fland as a passer-cutter combination. I think with Hartenstein out of delay action off the top of the key, I can see Adou Thiero getting 2 or 3 easy layups a game by just back-cutting his guy and saying, yeah, I'm more physically gifted than you. I can get up and play above the rim despite catching the ball and having no forward momentum. Like, he just is physically gifted in ways that other wings and other players who are going to be NBA caliber players just aren't. And I think Adou Thiero, for me, is one of the more underrated players in this entire class. And I think 24th overall, the Thunder just get another A-plus level grade with this pick in this mock draft. Pick number 25, the Orlando Magic here now via the Denver Nuggets. And I just mentioned this player. 25th overall, I have the Orlando Magic here selecting guard Boogie Fland out of Arkansas. He does not fall far from his Arkansas teammate Adou Thiero, and Calipari guards have tended to work out pretty well in the NBA, but there's been some that haven't. Ty Washington's an example of a recent one that just didn't pan out quite great in the NBA. And I think for Orlando here, you're spinning a real wheel of risk on taking Boogie Fland here, 25th overall. Now, the risk isn't that high, right? This isn't the 3rd or 4th overall pick like we talked about with Ace Bailey or Jeremiah Fears at the top of the draft. This is pick 25. You can stomach a risk here at this point in time. But the risk really for Orlando is opportunity, because you're looking for someone who can be the point guard of the future. And Boogie Fland did not have an effective college basketball season when it comes to scoring the rock. Shot very poorly from the field. True shooting percentage isn't great. Didn't get to the free throw line a ton, but did exhibit and showcase some real shot-making upside at times with his pull-up jump shot. And I think when he is playing on balance and on time with his decision-making, he can be an effective scorer down the road. He's just not there yet. And I think for Orlando, when it comes to opportunity, whether it's trading these picks, trying to win now, trying to put a team that makes the most sense long-term around Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, that's where you're really risking this opportunity. But if this does pay out, if this is the reward you're looking for long-term, being the franchise point guard at some point down the road, Boogie Fland, I think, could be looked at as a very undervalued prospect. Boasted a 3.5 plus assist to turnover rate this past year for Arkansas. Kind of weathered a lot of the ball handling responsibilities. And I talked about Adou Thiero as a cutter. This is who was facilitating to Adou Thiero a lot. This is who was working in pick and pop with Zvonimir Ivisic in Arkansas before Ivisic's transfer to Illinois to play with his twin brother Tomislav Ivisic, who we mentioned earlier. Was not expecting to talk about the Ivisic twins much in this mock draft. Here we are, talking about them twice, but that's where we're at in this. But Boogie Fland, I do think, for Orlando specifically, like the playmaking, the pull-up shooting, there's a lot to be attracted to for him as a prospect, but there's also a lot of concerns defensively. He is extremely light. I think for Orlando, it really comes down to if you think trading these picks is what you do, you need to tell me who you're trading them for. I don't know what star player you're getting for pick 16 and pick 25 in the draft. It's going to be a challenge, especially when they have big contracts already committed to a lot of their young pieces. We'll see where Orlando goes, but Boogie Fland at 25 is where I landed in this mock draft. Pick number 26 is the Brooklyn Nets via the New York Knicks. Quick reminder here, brand new NBA draft lottery simulation video coming out on Tuesday. I'm not going to give too many details. I don't want to spoil it, but it's a video you're going to want to watch. A lot of work, a lot of time went into it. That's why there was no upload on Sunday this week, but you got a mock draft Monday, and you have a really fun video coming out on Tuesday, so I hope you guys do enjoy that when it does come out. But 26th overall here, Brooklyn, via the New York Knicks, I have selecting guard LeBaron Philon out of Alabama. So after going with Jeremiah Fears and at number 19 going with Hugo Gonzalez, they now come with another upside pick in LeBaron Philon, someone who is kind of a hybrid tweener guard, can handle the ball a bit, can definitely push in transition, bring the ball up the court when you want him to, but really isn't a true point guard, probably fits more as this off-ball guard who can attack closeouts, play off the catch a bit. I think the hope and optimism is that his jump shot continues to develop and emerge. I think at this point in time, it's not a safe bet to assume it will, but I think there is definite intrigue around the league and what that jump shot's going to look like long term. So I think for Brooklyn specifically here, you're looking for someone who can be an impact defender. LeBaron Philon took on that challenge a lot for Alabama. Now I do think it's worth noting that the Crimson Tide did not have a good defense this year. So just because he took on that challenge doesn't mean it was the most effective way for them to try and win defensive possessions. But I do think for Bama specifically and for Brooklyn taking the Alabama guard LeBaron Philon here, you're looking at the long-term projection and you're hoping that with 4 first-round picks in this draft that if you get the positive outcomes of a few of Jeremiah Fears, Hugo Gonzalez, LeBaron Philon, that your franchise is really moving forward in a positive direction long-term with a lot of flexibility in the short term, whether that be through free agency, trades. They have a bunch of future picks via New York and a few other teams as well. So definitely an interesting situation. Pick number 27, the Brooklyn Nets here now own this pick via the Houston Rockets. And Brooklyn, after going with LeBaron Philon the pick before, I have them taking here forward/center Thomas Sorber from Georgetown. Now, throughout most of this process, I have envisioned Thomas Sorber kind of being a tweener frontcourt player. It's going to be interesting because he did have a very good block rate playing for the Georgetown Hoyas, did play some center for them, but he wasn't very active despite having great physical tools defensively. Georgetown mostly deployed him in drop coverage. And in the NBA, I don't know if he's big enough to be a great drop coverage big, which is why I'm thinking he has to be kind of a tweener big forward 5 combo. And if that's the case, then where's the value? He only shot about 16% from 3 this past year. I have a lot of concerns, but there are some things I love as well. And I'm trying to be more optimistic in some of these mock drafts, especially at this point of the cycle. I just want to show how much I love the game, and also I just want to bring some positivity. And Thomas Sorber, one of my favorite things watching when I do watch him play, when I throw on his tape or try and catch a full game. Obviously, throughout the course of a college season, I don't catch every single prospect's full game. I try and go back and watch as many full games as I possibly can. For Sorber specifically, I love his face-up game. I think there's a lot of dynamism with him. He does a very good job weaponizing his triple threat position. You think about his rip-throughs. He rips, goes, counter goes. I do like that. And I think for Brooklyn specifically, I talked about them playing out of delay action a lot and with dribble handoffs and spreading the floor out that way. Sorber, I think, is going to be comfortable in that regard. So if you do project him playing the 5, which is sort of what I'm doing here for Brooklyn, yes, it's small. You're probably not going to be able to build a great defense that way. And I would be very hesitant about that alongside Jeremiah Fears as well, if that's ultimately the pick earlier in the draft. But Sorber, for me, specifically here, I think fits offensively into their identity by triggering into dribble handoffs, by initiating offense, also giving them someone who can be a unique face-up big man. I think in a lot of ways a very, very poor man's version of Derik Queen. I think significantly worse prospect at this point in time, but I definitely understand some of the allure that people see in Thomas Sorber. I myself just don't really trust the touch. I have questions about the defense, specifically guarding out in space and on the perimeter. I just don't know if he's big enough to be an effective drop coverage big man, but I do understand some of the allure for sure for those who are higher on him than myself. Pick number 28, the Boston Celtics here now. At this spot in the first round, I have the Boston Celtics here selecting forward Nick Clifford out of Colorado State. And this is a pretty interesting switch up for me for Boston. Obviously, I've been looking at guys who are either super high-volume three-point shooters or backcourt players to give them some long-term flexibility next to Peyton Pritchard and Derek White as Drew Holiday continues to age. But I do think for Boston here, I went and I kind of got down a rabbit hole thinking through, well, what if they went with a much older prospect? What if they went with someone like Nick Clifford, who's 23 years old already? If they go that direction, what are some of the downsides? And while you might say, well, the ceiling's significantly lower, I think for Boston, the biggest advantage here of drafting an older player is you're getting someone who is presumably NBA ready on day one of his career, and you're going to have him on a cost-controlled contract through his early prime. And that specifically is a big deal for Boston now with new ownership group coming in. You think about the tax bill that they have year in, year out as a second apron team. They have so much money committed to Tatum, Brown, Porzingis, Holiday, White. They need to find ways to save every dollar they can. If they do draft a rotation player here, and they already have some interesting long-term bets as well in Jordan Walsh. I really love the Baylor Shireman pick they made last year. You guys know how much I like Shireman pre-draft. they've kind of proven to be looking at some older prospects, specifically with that Showerman pick. And I think Nick Clifford, someone who has really legitimized his three-point shooting, shot 36+% from three back-to-back years for Colorado State. High volume, did a little bit of everything for the Rams. This is the type of pick that the Celtics might look at and say, can he be the 8th or 9th guy in a rotation? And while that's not a sexy first-round pick, it's a functional one and one that helps them on day one of his NBA career. Moving on to pick number 29, the Phoenix Suns here now via the Cleveland Cavaliers. This continues to be one of the hardest picks to mock, obviously not only because it's at the end of the first round, so you already have to have a good indication of who's going to be available and who won't be, but then you're also battling with the direction of the Phoenix Suns. Are they going to tear this thing down pretty drastically? The answer to that's probably no, but it doesn't mean they won't look at a young, very young upside player here at 29. But let's use their most recent draft as kind of evidence for them going against that. They drafted Ryan Dunn, someone who I would say does not have much offensive potential at all, but someone who a little bit more established, couple of years of college basketball, very well defined to be a defensive player. And then Oso Ighodaro, another older college prospect, someone who I think had a relatively high floor for his draft positioning, and then a very, I think, relatively low ceiling compared to his other classmates in the draft last year. I think the Suns going older does make some sense, but 29th overall here, I have them kind of going in that middle ground. Another, kind of like they did last year with Ryan Dunn, a semi-younger player who's not really young, has some championship experience in Alex Condon, who won a national title with the Florida Gators. And I think for Phoenix specifically, obviously they pulled the trigger on a Nick Richards trade last trade deadline. Didn't really love that for them. I just didn't think he was worth the amount of picks that they gave up, especially at the pick deficit they were at. But they still have a pick here now after trading their 2031 first for multiple picks via Utah through Cleveland and swaps with Minnesota in there too. Ultimately, the Suns are looking at this and saying, okay, we can get a player who fits our team right now, but also maybe has some room to still grow in Alex Condon, someone who has very good coordination, understands passing angles very well. Obviously, this is another very good delay action big man who can trigger into dribble handoffs, flow into backdoor cut passes. Very, very adept at using his body as a screener as well. So I think for Phoenix, this kind of balances between the two possible routes for them, where they, instead of going super young, you're not taking a true freshman, but you're also not taking a 23, 24-year-old prospect either. Alex Condon kind of splitting the difference there a bit at 29. And now at pick number 30, the LA Clippers here via their swap with the Thunder, and I have them taking wing Noah Penda out of Lamont. The LNB Pro A wing defender, I think, really does have a legitimate shot at being an impact defensive-minded player in the NBA, and I think for the Clippers specifically, a team that has really prided itself on defense this year, and around James Harden, they have done a great job building a very good team defense. A lot of credit to Jeff Van Gundy. Credit, of course, to Ty Lue as well as the head coach there for building that infrastructure, with Ivica Zubac being one of the most underrated players in the entire league. A true defensive anchor, should have been in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. It was criminal that he wasn't a finalist for that award, honestly. In a lot of ways, I think he was just a great defensive player for them. And I think if you look at how much they valued Chris Dunn this year, the minutes they've given to Derrick Jones Jr. Obviously, when Kawhi Leonard's engaged defensively at this point and healthy, he is still one of the best defenders in the entire NBA, with his ability to just rip the ball away from people. The size of his hands and palms are just incredible. So, pause again. But the Clippers at 30 here, I think getting Noah Penda, someone who's really succeeded playing professional basketball in the LNB Pro A and being able to guard out in space, be able to win isolation battles one-on-one. Defensively, this is a low upside offensive player, but someone who comes in with a very, very steady, solid floor defensively, which is going to be high effort, high motor, make plays, strong technical skills, screen navigation is respectably good, and I think the isolation, length, size, athletic tools are good enough for him to definitely be a competitive defender in the NBA as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, I really hope you guys did enjoy. Don't forget to spam the W Texas Sports down in the comments section, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.